Welcome back if you're watching online. Again, this is Stephanie Liesenfeld Appreciation Day. She is so generous with her time. I don't know what I would do without her. So, all right, we're going to pick it back up here. We're going to keep rolling. If you start feeling tired, just feel free to get up. You're not going to bother me. Scott is good with exercises. He'll lead you in the calisthenics. All right, let's get it back together here. Everybody got their seat? How to budget your money. So we've talked about the fact that you should. Now let's talk about some things in specific. Here's your simplified budget. You're saying, I need the simplest thing I can do. This is where you start. This is the starter kit budget. 3 things, 10% to God, 10% to yourself, spend whatever else you got. That's your starter budget. That's where you would start, and that's a very simple thing to do. It doesn't have all the components that you might want to have in a budget, but at least it gets you going in the right direction. You make God your partner. You're going to think about the end of your life and the need for savings, for having some wealth. You know, a lot of people work and they never pay themselves. It's kind of a crazy thing. We get so caught up in spending everything we earn, but that's why God said the foolish spend everything they get. Because the wise person's thinking, I'm not always going to be able to do what I'm doing now. I got to think about the future. And we're going to talk about how powerful that is. The earlier you start thinking about your future and taking action on it, how much better it will go. But it's never too late. So, but what happens is you might not have as much, or you need God to give you other blessings, or you might need to curtail back. And instead of 10%, you might need to go 20, 30, 40, 50%. You have things, or you ask God for chunks. Give me chunks to lay in. So there's ways to catch up. But, you know, the thing is, ideally, we would be living this way, and we would be teaching our children to live this way so that they develop the right things. My kids are not allowed to spend all their money. They cannot spend all their allowance. In fact, we only allow them to spend about half their money, because they need to give to God. They need to give to the things they have in life. Because do you ever really get to spend all your money? No, right? The government takes money. You got to pay for your housing, electricity if you want electricity in your house, running water, right? There are things that we want to have. You never get to have all your money. The expenses of life come into play, and you got to deal with those things. So why let your kids start with a false belief that they can spend every dollar that comes into their hand? You're teaching them the wrong thing. So teach them like a baby. Babies have to be taught the principles. Teach your child financial principles. But the key is only live on what God gives you. Contentment. If God hasn't put it in my hand yet, I don't get to spend it. Right? It's very, very important. If God hasn't given it to you yet, don't spend it. So when you want something more than you have, ask your business partner. I need a raise. I need more. So, and then your business partner will come back and say, okay, well, what you're doing, I can do this and I'll bump you up. Or what you're doing, I might need to switch you into some other kind of work. Allow God to lead you in ways. Be open to what God will show you to do. But allow God to be your partner. Get engaged with God. This is so important. I can't stress it enough. Get engaged with God in the way you manage your money. Now, let's look at a little more sophisticated. Now we stretch it out. We write out a budget. The budget is meant to cover every dollar that comes in. There's not a dollar that doesn't have a place to go. And the dollars get arranged and managed in a way that makes sense. Now, again, you are like the king of your financial kingdom. You're the king. God has made you the king of what you take in, and the dollars that come in are the servants of your kingdom. And you are going to direct those dollars where to serve you, God, and others in the way that you live in this kingdom. So you think about your dollars that way as servants. Where do you want them to be going? Where do you want them directed? Have you put your laborers out yet? So if you were running a plantation, I want you to think of your finances as a plantation. You might have, some sheep out in a certain area. You might have fields where there's corn and soybeans. You've got crops and hay you're doing where your horses are going to be. And you're thinking of all the things that a big plantation might have. And what you're doing is you're directing out, okay, these servants, I want you going here. I want you going out and working the hay. I want you to go work in the corn. You're going to go out, with the sheep, and you're going to go out with the oxen. And I want you working here in the garden and, the potato patch. And you have to direct your laborers where to go to serve the needs of the whole household. So when you look at the household, your household is that income you take in. So whatever it is, where are you directing it to go? Here's what's awesome. You get to direct it. This is one of the freedoms and liberties God gives you. You get to direct it. So ask God to help you. Ask God to bless you. Ask God to show where it goes. But notice you can have a budget where everything that you would get in your net pay would come out. I just had a question about tithing, so I might as well address that right there. I have this on net tithe. And the reason I do is very simply this. What is the tax rate where it becomes impossible to tithe on gross? I met a man when I went to college who lived in a country where the taxation rate was 90%. If he would have tithed on gross, he would have had nothing. So here's a general rule, and I think this is a very good rule. Whatever dollar comes into your hand is a dollar that you control, is a dollar that you give to God. Because you can't control the cost of doing business. Taxation is a cost of doing business in this country. For instance, I have costs. I make a profit in a business, but I have costs that I have to pay to generate. I don't pay on gross dollars that come to my company. I have to pay employees. I have to pay rentals and leases and everything. But once I've paid all the expenses of being able to make a profit, now there's where every dollar that I get now goes to the government. But after the government's done with it, anything that comes into my hand, I do. But realize the government does deserve something, because the government does protect my interests and allows me to do business in this country. They do work on roadways and public services and the things that do allow me to do business here. So don't kill, the goose that lays the golden eggs. We live in a country where we might complain about the taxation. I just say, I don't like it, but get over it. It's a cost of doing business. So I tithe. I'm recommending you tithe on whatever dollar comes into your hand, because everything else is just a cost before it gets to you. So, and it goes to many various things. All right? So then you pay God. You notice at the bottom we have savings, paying yourself a portion, about 10% of what you take in. And you have your utilities, your household, your home. But here's the thing. Don't let dollars go out that you haven't at least thought about. I picked on Starbucks earlier. Let me give Starbucks props. I go to Starbucks once in a while. I enjoy it. I enjoy taking people there and buying them a coffee from time to time. I like it. But I've thought about where those dollars are going. Don't do it without thinking about it first. Make a decided effort. Don't just spend money without thinking about where did that come from? What budget is that coming out of? That's what I'm talking about. Because maybe you don't have a budget for that money. And by budgeting, you're saying, you know what? I can take that money. I have a little excess in this budget. I can take it out for going to Starbucks. But you might look and say, you know what? I'm kind of running tight on my budget. I can't do that. So what you do is you think about where your dollars are supposed to go. And if you are beating your budget, enjoy a little of the fruit of the labor. I have a deal with the guys that work for me that when they go out, they have to do a travel budget for the year. We make sure it's a good, tight travel budget. I think it's good that you manage your finances. We're not just going to spend any money you want to spend. We have a budget for hotels and flights and cars and meals and tolls and everything else. But guys, we're going to approve your budget. If you can come in under your budget, we're going to share the wealth. You're going to get half, and we're going to get half. We all get to enjoy the fact that you did a good job coming in under budget. So when you think about your finances, you set up a budget, but then the game is, how can I beat the budget to have something left over? The little surprises, the little gifts of God that are extras. And then you get some things that come in. So maybe you're paying your taxes, and you've got your net pay, and you've got all these things, and let's say you get a tax return. Woo! Right? You get a little something back. Maybe you weren't expecting, you didn't budget for it. And now you get a little blessing. You get a little hit. You get a little bonus. You get a gift. All these things go into it. The thing about this, though, is you all want to make sure that you have it earmarked for what you want it to be, where you want it to go. You've thought about it. Okay, now on this next slide, this shows how to take that same budget and track it. This shows a spreadsheet. You can get as detailed as you want. Now for some, you're like, I cannot do that. I've got to go with a 10-10-80. That's fine. You got to start somewhere. Go with the 10-10-80 plan. 10 to God, 10 to yourself, and 80 for whatever else you got. You just put that in a lump sum, that 80, and if it is an expense, you know you got to pay it out. I like to know, now where's that money going to go? 80% in one lump sum's too big for me. I need to break it down because I know I got a mortgage expense, right? Or I got a utility expense or a car expense, and I've got these different expenses. I need to break my 80 down into pockets. Now, this spreadsheet is designed in a way, again, by the talented Stephanie, who's done our budgeting for 22 years now. She's tracked every dollar that's come into our household since the day we got married. And it's a very nice thing to have a wife who likes to track the money and keep track of things, because it's amazing how you can end up with it when you're tracking it and you're thinking about how you're spending your dollars. But this is really what I would call the envelope way of managing your money, which is this. Every time we get a paycheck, according to the budget, that money is paid into one of these columns. You see where it says at the top, first tithe, $200, travel, $250, home mortgage, insurance tax, $1,300, utility, $450, household? That's our budget. So the paycheck comes in, and now with that paycheck, that money gets allotted to that account. So if we got it all in cash, we would have envelopes. Okay, here's our mortgage, here's our travel, here's our tithe, here's our utility, here's our household. It would be like we put the cash into each envelope, and then when those expenses come up for that category, we would go to that envelope and take the cash out. So we know that there's our budget, we're putting our money in with each pay period, we put the allotted amount in, and that's where the money comes from for those categories. This is the computerized version of that system, which is every dollar goes into a budget, every dollar comes out of a budget, and it's tracked on which one does it come out of. This is the way businesses do business. You think about it. Businesses that are smart have a budget. We do a budget. We go down every line item, every single thing. And when we spend money, we know where it goes. And when we get our statements, we get statements at the end of every month. We go right down the list of where the money went. Running your life this way will help you really see where you're spending your money. And then you're going to say, we spent how much on going out to eat? We spent how much on going to the movies? Well, we need to cut that back. Or we're not spending enough. Look at the extra we have. I don't know what it is for you, but you should at least know what it is, okay? So this one tracks it. You get money come in. So every time there's a check that comes in, every time that money comes in, you can see the gross and net on 1/5/14. A paycheck comes in. There's the gross. There's the net. There's the allotments to the first tithe. And then the line underneath it, the January budget. Those dollars all go into their own budgets. Boom, 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 boom. It's all in there. Now that money's in there for what comes up. And then as the things come out, so you can see like on household, right after that on 110, we had gas, $58. We had groceries. We spent $92. We were hungry that week. we spent gas, utilities, $74, water, $73, the phone, the cable, internet, $80. So it all comes out of that budget. And then what you get at the bottom is there's a tally that shows you how you doing in those envelopes. So you don't physically see the dollars, but on paper, you can see, okay, well, you know, our budgets, we're looking good. We're starting to get some bonuses. Look at that. They start to tally up. The beautiful thing, again, and I can only credit God, it just seems like every time we make a budget, we get to come in under budget. Stephanie's really good at making us come in under budget. So it's kind of a game to come in under budget, because then you get extra fun money, right? Because when you've taken care of all your work and you've built the outside, now you can have things that are kind of nice. You can say, oh, go out on a little date night, or you have something special, have some friends open a bottle of wine together, but it comes out of some place that you've had for your dollars. So now this is very much the other side. So if the 20-20-20-80 is good for you, go with that. But if you say, no, I want to manage it like a business, I want to manage my finances like a business, then go to this length. Because this is what businesses do. You don't just let dollars fly out without knowing where they have come from and where they're going. You have to be smart about it. Think about what you have, okay? All right, so have a budget. Point number 6, live debt-free. I cannot emphasize this enough. Big problems when you go into debt. Let me tell you something. It costs too much to live an indebted lifestyle. It costs too much. You will end up paying other people your profit, your wealth, in interest. Don't do it. You're selling out your tomorrow for something today. Big mistake. Big mistake. Proverbs 22, verse 7, the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Read that, live that, know that. Do you want to put yourself in enslavement? You get those credit cards and they say, oh, you could just charge it right here, right now, and you don't have the money to pay off what they want you to spend. You've got to say, no, you're trying to enslave me. Because God told me the borrower is servant to the lender. I don't want to be your slave. I want to be free. So you have to have an attitude and approach to the way you manage your money. Don't live in debt. Now, here's the only debts I would say that are reasonable and rational. Whatever is secured by an actual asset. You buy a home, you need a mortgage payment, but if you don't make that payment, they don't come after you, they come after the home, at least in the state of California and many states in this country. The asset is what backs up the note. And if you put enough down payment down, you're usually in an equity position anyway, where if you can't make your payments anymore because you run into financial problems, you give your house back to the bank and they have an asset, and there it goes. But it's an asset. It's something that you need for living or that can make a good investment for you. So it's not, what you're doing is you're taking dollars and now you have property. They're both assets. They're both assets. So realize it's an exchange of asset. The problem with indebtedness is when you change an asset like a dollar for a consumable. I went into debt so that I could go on this vacation that I can't afford. Big mistake. That's not what you should be doing. What you're really saying is, God, you're not giving me enough, so now I want to just go spend what I don't have to have some fun, and he'll let you do it, but now you're enslaved. Now you are the servant to the lender. Romans 13:8, owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves one another has fulfilled the law. Owe nothing except to love. So make that the only debt you owe. And in your life, make this the aim, that this is all I'm going to owe, is to love one another. 1 Timothy 6:8, and having food and clothing, with these things you shall be content, because contentment comes from God. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Don't be tricked by the allurements of this world and the advertisements that you see on television or on billboards or in newspapers to buy what you don't need. Friends, let me just make this real clear, because this is the financial world and this is the marketing world and this is the covetous age in which we live. It is all designed to get you dissatisfied with your life so you'll spend your money on things they want to sell you. And you might even be tricked into thinking you need it. What do you need to live? I guarantee you that much of the expenditures that we have in our age have nothing to do with food and clothing. In fact, I was just looking, we spend so little on food and clothing now. Back in the 1960s, we spent about 17% of our income was on food. Now we spend 6%. You know what else happened in the 1960s? We spent about 4 to 5% of our money on health. Now we spend about 19%. Think there's a correlation there? What's very interesting when you look back at the last 50 years of how households spent their money in terms of percentages, they almost all stay the same except for food and health care. We're eating processed, cheap, unhealthy food. We've commercialized it. We've gone away from organics and heirloom products and natural things, and we've gone into make it quick, make it fast, make it processed, and it's really cheap. It's terrible for you. but we're paying because now our health expenses have gone up, because we have ailments and sicknesses that we probably shouldn't have, but we're treating our bodies terribly. So there's the only correlation. In the last 50 years, as a percentage of income, those are the only two things that have any kind of significant change. Food way down, healthcare way up. Okay, now there might be other reasons about healthcare, but again, was it Hippocrates said, make your food your medicine, medicine your food. All right, live debt-free. 7, do not co-sign for another person's debt. I learned this one the hard way. Oh, the stress of it. Oh, just to be out of debt. And not only did I co-sign on a note for somebody, what I didn't know, being so young and so naive and 21 years old and just being stupid, I didn't read the whole document and the fine print, and part of which said that this was not only security for the note that was being signed at that time, but also for any notes this person signed in the future. And the indebtedness went from a certain amount and it multiplied almost 5 times. And it was so stupid. And, well, you'll know why I like this next verse. My son, if you become surety for your friend, Proverbs 6, 1-5. Proverbs 6, 1-5. If you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in a pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son. Deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. In other words, you are so trapped. You are caught. Yes, I was. And it just won't happen again. If you're going to co-sign, just make sure that you can pay it all off without hurting yourself financially. If you can't do that, if you say, hey, my kid needs a co-sign on a $1,000 note, and I'll scrape together the $1,000 if they don't come through. Okay, if you want to be giving to your kids like that, okay. As long as you have the money. But if you don't have the $1,000 to give, you don't have the money to give. And don't co-sign what you can't pay. So please, don't co-sign on a note that you have no business signing for. You need to look at it the way God says to look at it. You've made yourself surety for somebody else. Guys, there usually is a reason why banks want surety. Because the first guy, they're not so sure about. All right? So just remember that. Okay, there's a reason for surety. So, and again, if it's your kid and you got the $1,000, maybe you should just lend it yourself to your child. Okay? Yes, no interest. Number 8, give to the poor and those in need. This is part of a good financial plan. Give to the poor and those in need. Why do I say this? Because God says in Proverbs 28:27, he who gives to the poor will lack nothing, but he who closes his eyes to them receives many curses. Err on the side of giving. It's just a better way to go. Listen, you have to be wise in the way you give. In the old-time community, you would basically know the people in your community. If somebody fell on hard times, you know the person. They're hardworking. If they had a job or if they could get work, they would be working. They're good for it, but let's help them out. This is how brothers look at this. The problem that we face today is we always are being approached by strangers. I get approached by strangers like every week. I'm a mark. I look like a guy who wants to give to somebody. I get approached all the time. So ask a few questions. Check out the story. I've given money to a guy who said, if you'll just give me $5, I'm going to go into this restaurant right here where I am. I just need I need some food. I gave the guy $5 because I was on my way to a meeting when he stopped me. He goes in, and I go on my way, and I come back, and he's telling the same story. And I walked right up to him. I said, hey, well, what's the deal? You told me all you needed was $5 for some food. You just needed to get some food, and you would be good. And I said, now you're right back out here. I said, you didn't eat, did you? He's like, just get away from me. I'm like, no, see, this is part of the problem. I want to give to you, but now you're not doing the right things after I've given to you. So this is the issue we face, right? This is the consternation. Because what did he want the money for? Was it drugs? Was it alcohol? Was it whatever? Was he just making his $50,000 a year? Many stories about how much these guys off these freeways are making a year. They're making in the top 1% of all people in the world off those those freeway exits, guys. Okay, just realize they're not in trouble. I have a friend, what's that? And it's tax-free money, too, which is even better. I have a chef friend who offered to give 2 people who were begging for money, who said, we'll work for food. He said, come in now. I'll pay you each $10 an hour. You'll be making $20 an hour to come and help us set up the kitchen and wash dishes and put them away. And they said, we make way more than that standing out here. Well, 20 bucks an hour, that's some decent coin. He thought he was being generous, and he said, that was it for me. I'll never do that again. They basically turned down, in effect, what was $800 a week of income if they had been working for him, which he was fine with them working for him. They wanted nothing to do with the work. They just wanted the money, and they didn't want to work for it. There's wisdom in this, in that you should realize the principle that we talked about before, he who does not work shall not eat. You're only enabling bad behavior. So have some wisdom, but all things considered, lean on the side of mercy. He who gives to the poor will lack nothing. He who closes his eyes to them will receive many curses. Don't make an enemy of your business partner. You want him to be on your side. Remember, you can't outgive God. Right? Notice this one. Proverbs 19:17. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord. All right. Now, he's good for it, right? He lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. Notice in Luke 6:38, given it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. So your attitude, if you have it in your hand to give it, and you know that this seems to be a reasonable thing, then be willing to give. But again, we have to remember what is the definition of poverty and poorness. What is the definition of people just wanting more and not? I had somebody call me for a donation from the church years ago, and they said, we are in such a tough way, we can't, we're barely going to make our rent, but we don't have any money for food. And as I'm talking, I could hear something in the background. I said, hey, is that Vin Scully? Oh, yeah. Oh, you're getting ready to watch the ball game. Yeah, getting ready to watch the ball game. So you're going to be sitting at home watching the ball game today? Yeah. I said, I'm here at work. I'm working, and you're watching the ball game, and you're calling me for money. I said, that's kind of an interesting thing. How much does your cable cost? And they didn't like that. And I said, listen, you're calling to ask me for money for food. I like to give people money who need food. That's a no-brainer for me. If somebody needs a meal to eat or some food, you can come to me. And I guess I'm saying this publicly, but I don't mind giving people money for food. It's a good thing to do. But you probably first need to cancel your cable, and you need to go sell that TV, because you've got some money right now. And then you might think about how you could start earning a living so that you could have food and, if you want to, get that cable going again and that television back. But that's the way things need to work. That's not poverty to be sitting in luxury when you're asking somebody else to give you for your need. That doesn't make sense. So just realize there is wisdom in this. But again, I would say, if I'm thinking that there could be legitimacy in what they're saying, even if they might be lying to me, I'd rather give it and not take the chance on it. God will give it back. God will give it back. All right. 9, save for a rainy day. There's always the rainy days. Notice this, Proverbs 10:15. The rich man's wealth is a strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. In other words, if you have nothing sitting aside for when it rains out, right? Say for the rainy day is, I can't go to work today, right? I can't go to my job because it's raining outside. I can't do what I'm needing to do. You need a little something sitting on the side to cover the rainy day, to cover the times when you can't go and earn a living. So have something on the side. A rich man's wealth is a strong city, which means that when financial pressures and times get tough, they have something stored up to live on for those times. They've thought about it, they've prepared for it, they've saved up for it. But if you are living paycheck to paycheck and something out of the ordinary happens, you get in an accident, you get hurt, something happens outside of your control, you're in a position now where you're in real trouble because now you don't have money coming in. So it will be the destruction. The poor of the poor is their poverty. So be willing to store up for that rainy day. Number 10, pay yourself, store and invest a portion of all that you earn. Okay? Pay yourself. This is the principle of what you take in hunting, what are you going to do with it? What you gather in the harvest, what are you going to do with it? You realize we live in a paycheck world, right? We get paid every 2 weeks or twice a month or some weekly or monthly. Some get paid by project, right? But in an agricultural society, you realize the interesting thing is you get a chance at your harvest, and now you got to make it last. That's a totally different way of thinking. And when you know that you're dependent on the increase of God, you're going to be on your knees a whole lot. See, our society's lost some of this, the dependency on God to bless the planting, to provide an increase that can then be taken and stored and then can be spread out over time in sales. So like when I go to visit potato farmers, they got one shot to get it right in Idaho. One shot. That's it. They harvest one time a year and they have to store the potatoes to ship and make money for the whole year. They got one shot to get it right. Onion guys that grow up there, they got one shot. We got onion problems this year. Got too much moisture in the onions. They didn't know it when they put it in the storage sheds. Now they're taking out product that they harvested last September. We got major issues in quality. There's too much moisture in it. It's a tough thing. Their dependence on God is there, and usually the farmers I deal with, they're very down-to-earth, godly people because they know they need help to make sure that it's coming in right. You need to store and invest a portion of all you earn, just like a farmer would, thinking ahead for the rest of this year, but also for your future. Now, notice this, Proverbs 6:6-11. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So your poverty shall come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. I remember my dad saying, don't act like you're rich, when I would get a little money in my pocket. Don't act like I can just spend it all. He said, you need to be thinking differently. That's the way people think who are foolish, David. You can't think that way and think that now I'm rich because I've got money, because the wise person says, hey, it's not always harvest time. There are seasons. When you are having a harvest, you need to think about winter. When you're in winter, you need to think about harvest, but you need to think about the seasons of life and the times that change financially to know that when it's coming in, don't live like now I'm rich. You know, a lot of the professional basketball players and football players and baseball players, they go bankrupt. And you're like, how in the world are you making millions and millions of dollars and you go bankrupt? Because they're spending what they get. They didn't really think about the future, or the way they took their money and invested it had nothing to do with the future or what was reasonable, and now they're out of money. Read about a basketball player years ago. He made over $50 million playing professional basketball, and less than 10 years after he retired, he was already broke. Oh, what a shame. He should have come to me. I would have helped him. I would have helped him for a low price of 1%. But the thing is, you have to have a plan for your future. If you're not thinking about it, why aren't you thinking about it? Now, look at, consider her ways, the ant, and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. God is saying, look at the way I made this creature, that when there's things to be gathered, it gathers because it knows that there's times coming that it won't be able to gather. But it'll have all the supplies it needs because it did what it needed to with its harvest. When you are in the working stages of your life, your teens, your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, to whatever point it is that you are no longer to gather in the same way, there is your harvest, friends. That's your time of accumulation, because there's going to come a time where you're not going to be able to work as hard, where you're not going to be able to go to the job and work at the same pace that you were your whole life. So you have to be thinking through accumulation about the fact that there's going to be a time you can't accumulate any further. So pay yourself, store and invest a portion of all you earn. 11, invest your savings wisely by design without fear and greed. Let me go back on just one point here, 10. People say, well, how much should I save? Well, it depends where you are in your life. It depends where you are in the stage, and everybody has a different answer to that. The general rule, though, I like the 10-10-80 rule, about 10%. You should pay yourself about 10% of what you earn. So think about that as a way. Remember when Joseph was going through the times of robustness, heading for the 7 years of famine? He took 20%. He said, I'm going to take 20% for 7 years so that when the famine comes, you can all do it. See, that's God's way. There was planning, there was thought, there was wisdom, intelligence, and they had food through the whole famine. No, they didn't starve in all of Egypt because of the wisdom of God through Joseph. You have to think about that. So invest your savings wisely by design without fear and greed. And without fear and greed, because just like the marketers of products, so are the marketers of investments. It's fear. They scare you to buy things that you may or may not want to buy. People get scared into buying gold all the time. Gold has been a really hot investment. It's gone up, but it's gone up more because of fear than it has because of the intrinsic value of gold. If you look back over the last 25 or 30 years now, gold has only doubled in price over the last 25 to 30 years, which means the return is about 2.5%. That's not even keeping up with inflation. Okay, that's what the longer term perspective of gold is. Now, gold has gone up quite a bit over the last 10 to 12 years because it hit a base low and it's been flying up. But don't buy something just because people scare you about the world's coming to an end and you have to have gold. I can tell you this. I have been hearing this since the 1970s. I've been hearing for 40 years you need to buy gold because the world's coming to an end. Okay? Friends, if the world's coming to an end, whether you have gold or not have gold, you're going to have much bigger problems, okay? That's all I'm going to say. I mean, if you have gold, do you think they're not going to take it from you, or it's going to be gone, or your life's not going to mean anything? Guys, preparing for the end of the world is a whole different ballgame, and the only thing I can really tell you with certainty is you should prepare on your knees. That's it. So if you think that you're doing everything to prepare for the end of the world, get real, okay? The Cossacks come in and they sack a village because they want to take what you have. If you think you have anything that's yours in the end of the world scenario, are you going to be killing people to keep what you've got? What are you going to be doing, really? Okay? These scenarios, though, are used and played all the time on a daily basis. You get on that computer, the scourge of mankind when it comes to investing, and they will scare you to buy stuff, to buy things that you don't need that, frankly, aren't even that good of investments. But they scare you into it because of some end-of-the-world scenario. Believe me, my father talked to me about this in the 1970s when there was gas lines and there really were problems. What do you think they were saying in World War II about the end of the age, right? I mean, what do you think they were saying when the Jews were being rounded up and killed? Guys, we keep going through the end of the age. I don't know when we're going to spin off and that'll be the end and God will intervene in all these affairs. What I do know is you can't measure your investments or develop a plan based on being scared. You can't live that way. God doesn't expect you to live that way, okay? Nor by greed, nor by being lustful, thinking, hey, we give you 120% of your returns. We give 100% returns all the time. Really? Where does that happen?
Ponzi schemes, shortly.
Oh, that's a good call, the Ponzi scheme, right? If it's too good to be true, it just may very well be too good to be true. There's reasonable things that you need to have check marks in your life. So if somebody's coming and telling you, hey, we make 100% every year on your money, you need to be saying, right, come on, okay? You have to have some mental checks in your life. So let's talk a little bit about this. Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Don't be quick in making a financial plan and don't jump into things just because it's, oh, you got to get in now. You don't want to miss the boat. I mean, all these things that investment people say to try to pressure you in. If you're feeling any, did I say any pressure to get into investment, back away. Back away. Because if you have to act on it today for it to be real, it's not real. Do you understand what I say? There isn't the today moment. Now, there might be a moment when somebody offers you something and you need to make a decision to do it. That's different. But if you are talking to somebody and they're pressuring you to buy something, back away. even if it's legit, you shouldn't be doing business with that person. Their motivation is greed, not you. And wherever the service of you is not involved in an investment, chances are it's not a good investment because they don't care about you. They care about making money for themselves. Back away from greed and hasty plans. Proverbs 12:24 says, the hand of the diligent will rule, the lazy man will be put to forced labor. In other words, have a plan for yourself, though, that you're going to invest. Don't be lazy in this. If you're putting aside money, you should have a plan for how you're going to run that part of the business of your life. Have a plan in place to do so. Proverbs 15:27, a greedy man brings trouble to his family because he takes money to try to make money that he can't make on some hasty greed scheme, and now the money's gone, and he troubles his own house. Greed is a very dangerous thing. So again, when you think about money management, we're talking spiritual character here. Greed is not good. Greed is just really covetousness, which is idolatry. Proverbs 28:20, a faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. You got to have patience. The patience of a farmer to plant product and wait for God to produce increase. I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to show you something quite amazing with money management and investing that is truly amazing, but it happens for the people who are patient, not for the people who are hasty. So how do you invest wisely? I want you to remember this acronym, SLYC. SLYC, S-L-Y-C, SLYC. When you're choosing investments, first of all, safety. That's the first letter, S, safety. You want to invest in things that are safe. Now, there's not perfect safety in anything, but let me give you an example. You get a little email advertisement, and it comes in, and it tells you about this stock that's the next best thing. They're going to be the next McDonald's. It's going to be so great, and they want you to put your money into this stock. And you look it up, and you find that it's on an OTC account. It has BBB at the end. Those are what are called penny stocks. They're hard to trade. They are on those exchanges because there's not a lot of money in support for the trade of that particular share. They're usually companies that have no earnings or no profits or so very little. And it's a story they're telling you to put your money into it because that's the way that stock's going to go up, by getting people to put money into it. And what happens is it's a game of old maid. Okay? Somebody will own something for $5. They say, you need to get in on this. I'll sell it to you for $6. Somebody buys it for $6. Say, hey, you need to get into this. Look, the stock's going up. It went from $5 to $6. Somebody else buys it for $7. Another guy comes in and buys it for $8. Hey, look, we've now gone from $5 to $8. You need to get in on this before it's too late. Somebody buys it for $9. Somebody goes for $10. Somebody goes for $12. Look at the stock. It's gone from $5 to $12. This is so hot. This is the next McDonald's. You got to get in on this. And then what happens is, the people who were willing to put their monies into this stock dry up, and the stock is worthless. It happens all the time. It's a game of advertisement to get you to buy, and they will even have, the mob is very famous in these things, they will run up those stock stories to get you to buy. They appeal to greed. They appeal to getting you induced into something because you're trying to make a quick buck, and there you go, and now your money's lost. Not a very safe investment. Okay? Investing in one company. Let's say that you have been saving through your work career. You get up into your 60s, 70s, and I have $500,000, and I'm going to go put this in the little corner deli as an investment. Is that a safe investment? No. Why not? Because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. If that business falls apart, your whole savings in retirement fell apart. That's not safe. Okay? Safety has to do with diversification of your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We were talking with Lori about index mutual funds or index funds. An index fund like the Dow, 30 top companies, right? S&P 500, 500 top companies, over 40 different sectors of business. See, that's very diversified. When you invest in index funds, you're investing in a way that's much more safe because you're owning companies that are big, that have assets, that have real estate, that have products, that have profits, that have capital share. You see, you've spread it out over big companies that even if they have trouble, all your eggs aren't in one basket, and these companies actually own stuff. Okay? So realize that with something like that, you have shares in things. It's not all left for one investment. It's not one company or one place. You're spreading it out. You're diversifying it. It improves the safety of your investment. So you can own a great company, but if that great company gets slapped with a lawsuit and now their business plunges because they don't, and now they're losing money and everybody's wanting to get out of that stock because they don't want it, you can lose money real fast in the stock market. It's not hard for companies to lose or gain, frankly, 20% or more in a day. So what I would suggest is leave the gambling to the gamblers. Put the investing into what's wise and what's safe. Liquidity. We'll go back to the example of putting all your money in the little deli at the corner. If you put your $500,000 into a business in the deli in the corner, and now you need to get some of that money back out because you need to live on some of it, how are you going to get it out? You got to find a buyer. That means you got to sell the whole business. You got to sell a share of the business to somebody else. How are you going to have that money come back out to you? You see, the one thing even about real estate, if all your money was in real estate in 2006, and you said, I need my money in 2007, how are you feeling about that, Denise, Wendy? Not too good, huh? Not too good. If all your $500,000 was in one house and you owned it free and clear in 2006, by 2007, that house was probably down, what, in the 400,000s? And it probably, over the next few years, lost about half of its value in Southern California, right? Your 500 went to about 250. Why? It wasn't liquid. You couldn't get rid of it. You owned an asset you couldn't get out of. Okay, so here's an important thing. Liquidity means a lot with your investments. It's better to take a little less of yield and income if you know you can get out of it. You want to own real estate? Own real estate investment trusts. They invest in multiple properties in multiple states. They diversify it out to make it safe so that there's a nice, usually about 6 to 12% return, and it's diversified out. So not all your eggs are in one basket. And anytime you need some of the money out, they'll give it to you. Okay? Stocks are another thing. Index funds are another thing. But if you're buying a stock like on the bulletin board, the penny stocks, you might not be able to get your money out. I know this because one of the foolish things I did as a young man is I bought stock and I tried to sell it one day and I couldn't. Scary. Fortunately, in about a week, I found a buyer and I got out. I made a nice profit. It was the dumbest luck 60% move I ever made. I made 60% on a stock in 1 year, but it was one of the most foolish things I ever did. So that's the one thing about learning in life. You have to look at how you made the money. Just because you made money doesn't mean you're smart. You might have just got lucky, and I got lucky. And I learned my lesson. You want to have liquidity in what you do. Be able to get out of the stock. Yield. What's good yield? When you talk about bonds, you're talking about 6 to 8% a year. That's a good yield. When you're talking about stocks, you're talking about anywhere from about 9 to 10% a year. When you're talking about real estate, you're talking about somewhere, generally speaking, about that 9 to 12% a year. Stocks can have runs, real estate can have runs. In different parts of the country, you're going to have different yields and returns. But if somebody's telling you that you're going to make 100% in real estate or you're going to make 50% year after year in stocks, run. You need to run. You need to be away from that, okay? Because now you're jeopardizing your safety when people start telling you stories, things that aren't true. So when things get too far out of whack, if somebody says, hey, we can move your stock yields from 10% to 15%, well, there might be a way to do that. But if they're saying they're going to move it from 10 to 50, now you got to check them, okay? Now you're getting out of line, okay? So you want to go back to yield and what makes sense, and then catastrophe proofing. There's no real way to catastrophe proof, but here's one thing you can do. You don't always have to be invested in something. If something's going down in price, you don't have to hold on to it. If you have liquidity, you should be able to move out of it and go to something that will hold your money steady, like a money market fund, as opposed to having it in a stock or a real estate or a bond investment. So you want to have some catastrophe proofing in what you do. The other thing is that diversification, again, is a good thing. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If everything that you have is in one business, that's a little scary, because if that business goes bust, you could be out of all of your investment. So you want to be able to diversify it, have some catastrophe proofing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, I want to show you something that's very interesting. What would happen if, when your child is born, they put $1 a day away for 60 years? $1 a day, $365 over the course of a year, and you were able to invest that at about 12%, which is, again, in the realm of reasonability for stocks, and personally I make more than that. I'll talk to you about how I do that. $1 a day for 60 years earning 12% interest. Notice how it can build $1 a day. Notice after 60 years what those dollars grew to. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? $3 million in 60 years by just putting $1 a day away from the time they're born to the time they're 60. 12% annualized a year return. You could have done this in the market over the last 60 years. In fact, I can show you ways that you would have made more than the 12% over the last 60 years. The thing is, time, patience has a way to make things blossom. I want you to notice something. You see the $3 million? How long did you wait to hit the 1 million mark? I want you to notice, how long did it take you to hit the $10,000 mark? It took quite a while, didn't it? It took quite a while to hit 10,000. Look where you finally hit the 100,000. You're over halfway through it when you finally pass the $100,000 mark. But see, what happens with people is they start investing and they say, okay, well, I'm doing it for the first year. I'm doing it the second year. I'm doing it the third year. It doesn't feel like anything's really happening. Well, that's like saying I planted a seed and it's been in there for 7 days. Where's my fruit? You're not going to grow tomatoes in a week, guys. You're not going to grow your retirement in a week either. Here's what's interesting. The energy that it took to go from $400 to $7,000 is the exact same energy to go from $1 million to $3 million. Do you get that? It's the same energy, the same movement of the market, the same amount of rate of return can take you from your $400 to $10,000. Okay? It's a good increase. But if you would have started with the million, it would have gone to over $3 million. Do you see what I'm trying to teach you here about this principle? There is a patience and an understanding to this. Now, let's say you don't have 60 years. Can anybody tell me a way to jump ahead? What? More investment. What if you say, hey, IRA limits this year were, I believe, $5,500, right? We had $5,500, I think, this year. $5,500 means for me and my wife, we can put in $11,000. You mean I could jump all the way to about year 12, 13 there? I could jump that? I could jump that ahead. What if we did that next year too? Whoa, wait, 11? We're going down. Oh, we just cut off another 5, 6 years. Wow. Do you see how that works? If you can start putting chunks into your retirement, you can catch up. Because the energy at the beginning, it's just as much energy as making that $1 million, $3 million. You have to jumpstart it if you're starting later. Okay? You have to put in lumps. So you get a bonus, put a lump in. Get your lump going. Okay? Now, it's very important to realize the power of this, because there are two ways for people to make money. One is to jumpstart and get ahead because they have lots of cash come in. It's easier to get up there faster, right? Hey, I got a $100,000 bonus for selling this huge account at work. Wow, just put it all in your investments, get it going, right? That's a way to jumpstart it. Or be patient, but be diligent to put in your dollars as you have them all along the way. Either way will work. One will take longer than the other, but they both work, okay? So if your kid is 15 years old, 20 years old, get them going. It's an easier route. Get them going. It's an easier route. Okay, notice this with me. What if Investor Joe and Investor John decide they're going to start investing their money? And Joe says, you know what? I'm going to put $4,000 away for the next 15 years. And John says, you know what? I can't do that. I can't put 10% aside for myself. You know what? I'm going to live on every dollar I make now. And once I have enough money left over, right, which is a funny thing all by itself. Once I have enough, once I've gotten to some ethereal thing out there, then I'm going to start putting my $4,000 away. Look they both put $4,000 away for 15 years in their investments. They both put the same amount of money away, but one did it at the start and one waited till he was 15 years into the process. And we gave Investor John $4,000 to start with, even though he didn't put his money there. I gave him $4,000 to start with. So really he did 16 years. He did an extra year. But notice this. After the 30 years, John, $400,000, Joe, $1.7 million. What does that teach you about investing? Get started. What are you waiting for? Okay? There's no reason to wait. Okay? The wise man's thinking ahead. He's thinking out. He's realizing this won't always be. You know? I go out to restaurants a lot in my job. I'm always looking at the people and I think, that's going to be me in 20 years if I'm still alive. That'll be me in 30 years if I'm still alive. I won't be the same person I am now. My winter is coming. If I live long enough, I'm going to enter the winter of my life. I can't work like I'm working now. So I'm thinking about David at age 70. David at age 70 has talked to me. Have you ever had your older self talk to you? David at age 70 has come to me and say, David, 45, I don't want to work like you work. And I tell David at age 70, me neither. So you need to be thinking about me now. I want you to pay me 10% or more of whatever you take in so that me, will have a nice life when you're 70. You have to think that way about yourself. People don't think about consequences. One of the worst things in our society is we try to eliminate the consequences. We don't think out of where our actions will ultimately lead. The same is true for positive things, though. So many times we don't have the patience to put the $1 a day in, or the $10 a day, or the $300 a month. We don't have the patience to see the future of what we're doing, that by taking little steps today, you can have huge success down the road. Frankly, there is no reason for anybody with a sound mind in this country who has lived here over the last 40 to 60 years, who was willing to put aside money from the day they started working and follow the plan I gave for them not to be a multimillionaire. There's no reason. There is zero reason. If you haven't done it in this country over the last 40, 60 years, there was something that wasn't right. Now, you can't go back and change. So just write that off. But you can do the right steps today. And maybe it won't benefit you, but it might benefit your children. It might benefit your grandchildren. It might benefit a charity, a church. It might benefit someone else. Remember this. You are not here to see how much money you can collect. You are here for God to see that you will be wise, loving, faithful, caring, humble, respectful, diligent, honorable, and so forth. So even if you didn't play the right way according to the godly biblical principles, remember, it's not about the money, friends. This is about your life. This is about who you are as a manager. If you haven't been faithful in the ungodly mammon, who will give the riches into your hands? Do you understand what I'm teaching you? this is much more than about dollars. This is about life. This is about character. This is about doing what's right the way God says to do it and allowing him a chance to bless you. If you've been co-signing for notes and you've been living in debt and you've been spending more than you've taken in, how do you think God's going to bless that? Why would he want to give more into that? It'll only ruin you. Because if everything in your life is about chasing pleasure and not thinking of future and not planning and having no diligence, that'll just ruin you. And I've seen people go from making $30,000 a year to $100,000 a year and having up to $400,000 a year. A man from $30,000 to $400,000 a year, and he did this in about a 10 to 12 year span. When he made $30,000, he never had money. And when he made $400,000, he never had money. Because he spent it on whatever he got. He just went broke at a higher level and went bankrupt twice. It wasn't a problem with him working to make the money. He knew how to make the money. He didn't know what to do with it once he got it. Bad character led to bankruptcy twice. Okay? But if he looks at that and he repents and he changes and he starts making money again and living by godly principles, he will have accomplished what God wants for him. Because it's not about the dollars, it's about the character. Okay? Because God can put, once you've learned the lessons, he can put eternal riches into your hands. And he knows you're not going to squander. You're going to be like he is. There's going to be character and thought and diligence and planning. You know, you're not here by chance, guys. Your body was fearfully and wonderfully made. There was thought in you and thought in this world and thought in this universe. So think about it. And think about the difference here between Investor Joe and Investor John. Start early and often, as much as you can. The other thing is, when you notice on John's, see how he went from 4,000, where did he double it? It was 1, 2, 3, 4, about year 5 or 6 there, right? But when Investor Joe put his 4,000 in year 1, he immediately doubled his money. From 4 to 8, bam, doubled. He cut out the first doubling. Now I'm going to talk about doublings because doubling your money is really what this is. It's constantly spinning it up, and how quickly can you spin your money up? The best way to do it when you don't have a lot, pay into it. It's a guaranteed rate of return on your retirement. So if you have 4,000 and you put 4,000 in, you just guaranteed yourself 100% return that year. You paid it in. You paid yourself the yield. And if you earned extra, bonus, right? Now you have 8,000, you pay 4,000 in, what'd you do? Guaranteed rate of return, 50% that year, right? 4,000 the next year. You went from 12,000 to 16,000, right? 33% return. And then if you get your 12 or your 10 or your 16 or your 20 or whatever it is, that all goes into the bonus. You see how you multiply it much more quickly, so you get up there fast. So Investor Joe's looking at it, he's like, I'm blowing you away, John. So much so I'm going to stop 15 years in. I'm just going to milk it. Because at some point, guys, here's the cool thing. Your contribution is meaningless to the money you're making in your yield and return. You see, look at the returns that he was making. In year 16, he was making $38,000 in his yield, right? $40,000 the next year. What did the $4,000 mean? It wouldn't mean a little something. But compared to the yield he was making because of his investments were now big enough, it didn't mean much. Okay? So here's the thing. If you're willing to be disciplined up front, now maybe those $4,000 investments, think about this. Investor Joe says that $4,000 I was putting in my retirement, I'm going to send that to the orphans in India. I'm going to send it to those kids we feed in the Ukraine. I'm going to send it over to the Philippines and start new churches. I'm going to send it to Africa for what they want. Because I have $4,000 a year that doesn't need to go to me anymore. I'm rich. I'm enjoying it. I can see that I'm going to be successful. Now I'm willing and ready to share what I have. See, now you're getting to something really cool. The power to bless others. That is very exciting stuff. All right. The rule of 72. Who knows what the rule of 72 is? Yes, sir, Ron.
7.2 years, 10% in money dollars.
That's right. So if you didn't hear that, every 7.2 years at 10% rate of return, your money doubles. So here's the basic rule, and it's called a rule, not a law, because it doesn't work as you get too far away from the 10%, which is this. If you take the number 72, the rule is if you take 72 and divide that by your rate of return, it will tell you the number of years it's going to take to double your money. So let me give you just an approximation. If you have a 14% rate of return, you take 72 divided by 14, how many years will it take for your money to double? All right, everybody's asleep. It's afternoon time. All right, let's try different math here. Yeah, about 5 years. A little over 14% will double your money every 5 years. What if you made 24% a year? 3. Now, I want you to think about this because the point is the rule of 72 will help you see how long it's going to take you to double your money. Doublings are important. So if you're only getting 7.2% a year, how long is it going to take you to double your money? 10 years. That's a lot longer than 5 years, right? At 14. The more interest you make, the faster your money doubles, the faster you do these turnovers in your accounts. So remember, the energy to double your money, whether it's a little bit or a lot, is the same. If you make 7.2%, it's going to take 10 years to double your money. If you have $1,000, it's going to take 10 years to make it $2,000. If you have 10 million, it's going to take you 10 years to make 10 million. But that energy is the same. From the 1,000 to the 2,000, the 1 million to the 2 million, as far as what we're talking about investments, it's all the same. So you want to understand the rule of 72 and the power of this. Now look at this chart. I put yields in there of 10, 12, 14, and 16%. These are all achievable rates of return over time. And when I say over time, I'm talking 25 to 30 years. Generally within 15, you can hit different rates of return, but I'm just going to put it out to 25 to 30. Most investment lifetimes are about a 25 to 30 year period of time. Of course, you can speed that up. But I want you to notice, I put in $1,000 at the start. What happens over time? How did the rate of return change that $1,000 over time? You see, when you make 10%, Ron told us, it takes 7.2 years, right? Let's say that you have an investment lifetime of 35 years. If you double your money every 7 years, how many doublings do you get? 5, right? So 1,000, so 1 doubling, 2,000, 4, 8, 16, 32, right? Very simple math. This is how you figure and use the rule of 72. So in that lifetime of 35 years, you're going to double your money. You're going to take that 1,000 up to about 32. Now, what if you were, instead of making the 10%, we're making 14%? We said already your money doubles about every 5 years. So now here's where it gets exciting. In the same 35 years, instead of your money doubling 5 times, your money is going to double 7 times. And what impact will those last 2 doublings have? What are they doubling? They're doubling your biggest amounts. Woohoo! That's where it gets exciting. So you go through that 35 years, that 1,000. So 2,000, 4, 8, 16, 32. Okay, there's your 5, 32, 64, 128. 32 to 128. Do you see how important it is to understand the rule of 72 and to understand the yield that you're getting? Remember the rule: safety, diversified liquidity, able to get it out. Yield. The yield is so important. You would say, but David, it's only a couple more percent. Well, 10%, 14%, isn't it all the same? Not at all. Okay, and realize 10 to 14, you think it's 4%, right? It's not 4%. That's a 40% greater return. Do you see that? It's not just 4%, it's 40%, because you're going from a 10% and you're adding another 40% to it. You're increasing that return. That's why these numbers end up getting so big. It's dramatic what happens over time. Now, learning to store in the winter. If you, at age 25, invest $3,600 per year at a 10% yield and contribute $300 every month until you're 65, how much money will you have approximately? Any guesses? All right, while you think about that, let me tell you about this 25-year-old. This 25-year-old got a job working on the produce docks in Chicago, where I started. He makes about $45,000 a year working on the docks. He's going to invest $3,600 a year of that money, a little less than 10%. This is a normal guy with a normal job making $3,600 or making $45,000, and he's going to get raises over time, but he's committed to do $300 a month, $3,600 a year. So he's not the guy who went to college, but he's got a decent job. He's working hard at it. He found a good job on the docks. When I was a kid on the docks, before I left for college, I was 18 years old. They offered me $28,000 to stay. I could have pulled something like this, no problem. And that was 27 years ago. All right. So how much money will he have 40 years later? Many guesses? 1.8. 1.8. That sounds about right. Did you cheat? Yeah. Add in a factor of another year. Invested $3,600 each year, 40 years, 144. I came up with 2.1, but that was based on a compounding thing. I don't know if yours did compounding or simple, but 40 years, 1.8. Depending on what investment calculator you use, I actually had conflicting things on the internet. Believe it or not, the internet wasn't consistent. But ballpark it. The reality is this. A guy working a job, putting away the $300 a month, if he does it from 25 to 65, he's going to end up a multimillionaire. Now, he's been making the 45 and he's gotten raises over time and he's had 50,000 a year, 60,000 a year. Maybe he works his way up to 65,000 a year. But if he was willing to be faithful for the 40 years and pay the money in, he can now have a lump sum where he can live on about how much? About 5%. You can comfortably live on about 5%, managed wisely and well. You might be more conservative and say 4. I've heard people going at 6 or 7. But 5% of whatever you have, you can withdraw and not cannibalize your capital, which means that if you have $2 million, you invest that. You can generally find investments in real estate, stocks, and bonds where you can conservatively make somewhere about 8 to 10% a year. Allowing for inflation, you can draw out about 5%. And taking out the 5%, how much can you draw out on $2 million? 100 grand. The guy who was working the job for 45, 55, 60,000 a year, by putting $3,600 away for 40 years, can now have an income of $100,000. Anybody can do this, guys, if you're committed to paying yourself, okay? The simple budget, God 10, you 10. Live on the other 80. Pay yourself. You're worth it, all right? God wants you to be blessed, okay? So again, rest of your life, and notice this. If you could live on 100 per year for the rest of your life and leave the principal to your heirs, now we're talking something cool. Right? You can put it to charities. You can put it to your churches or ministries or efforts. You want to put Bibles around the world in China, get them in there. We're going to donate the 100,000 I was living on. Now that 100,000 goes to getting Bibles into China. I bet you can find some people that would be interested in helping you if you were going to give them $100,000 a year to get Bibles into China. Just saying, there's ways things can happen. You can do things. It gives you opportunities. What did it take? Discipline to the Word of God, making God your business partner, living the right way when it comes to money. $3,600 invested wisely. There it is. All right. Now, let's look at this $3,600 per year for 40 years. And I want to go back to the 10, 12, 14, and 16%. Okay? Because this is where it gets a little crazy. I did that based on the 10%. But what if you could earn the 12, the 14, or the 16? Now what kind of money are you talking about? The guy who was making the money that you make on the docks, about $45,000 a year, who was willing to put $3,600 a year away from 25 to 65, the 40 years, if he's able to make 12% instead of the 10, he's going to have about $3.6, $3.8 million. Okay? The guy who's the 14, he's going to have over $6 million. Think about that. If he was able to make 14% a yield for the last 40 years of his life, when he gets to 65, $6 million, 5% of that, that's a $300,000 a year income. He never made that much in his whole life. What could he do for himself? And what could he do for others? His discipline, his whole life, showed a faithfulness in little, and now God was able to bless him with much, to be very generous. This is what's so cool about God's ways. God shows biblical financial management principles that work, and when applied in the real world, will work. Patience, diligence, working it out. Okay. How can you achieve these returns? I want you to notice here, does anybody need a break? I know I'm going really long. I'm sorry. You can watch it on the recording if you need to leave. I get it. All right. So here we are on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I took this from 1900 to the current year. Okay? So you're getting to look at over 100 years of the market. Which way has the market gone? Up. Why do markets go up over time? Because when you take resources from the earth, put intelligence and work and creativity into those resources, you make things that generate profit. Okay? The resources of the earth with the mind God gave man together make a profit. Profit. Labor demands a profit. The markets have gone up. Now, the thing about the markets is it's not just based on the success of companies, it's also based on the trading of those companies and the monies that come in. So I want you to notice something. The general trend has been up, but do you see what happened there? Is this a little thing on here? Ah, yes, thank you. Doug, I got a laser pointer. So happy. All right. Does anybody know by looking at this chart what this time period was? The Roaring 20s. It roared up. The market went from 63 here is the total price of the Dow. Now, you know the Dow's like, what is it, 10, 11,000, 14,000, whatever it is today. Right there. Okay, it was 63. The whole Dow was 63. Okay? It went all the way up to 380. Almost 400 in just a few years. Why? Because they allowed people to leverage their funds up to 90%. So you know when you go to buy a house, you have to put a down payment, right? 5%, 10%. But if you have that little amount, you have mortgage insurance, right? But if you do 20%, you don't need mortgage insurance. Okay? Real estate's very stable in a sense. Land doesn't change value as much as stocks do. What they allowed in the stock market was you could put 10% down. Uh-oh. What happens when the market goes from 380 to 294 and you were leveraged into that market putting 10% down on the stocks you owned? What happened? Bust! You were out of the game. Done. So if you put $100,000 in and you bought $1 million of stock for your $100,000 and that stock share went down by more than 10%, you were done. This is ridiculous. And this is what caused the run-up, because people could leverage their money, and it became a game, a shell game. The market really wasn't worth that. The businesses weren't really worth it. They drove the market up. Guess what happened? No more buyers. They all bought in. Now what do? It's a game of old maid. Who's going to get stuck with the last cards? So the market goes down 10%. The guys that were in at 10%, you're out. Uh-oh, it went down 10%. The guys that were in at 20%, they just lost half their money. They're trying to get out. What does it do? It drives down the market. They're trying to sell and have something left. Sell, 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 because there's all these leveraged positions to get back to reality, which happened when the market fell. It went from $63 that seemed fairly steady in 1922. It dropped all the way to $41. Everybody had to get out because the market had just fallen from about 400 to about 40. It almost was like 90% of the value of the market left. That's rough. What if you had gotten into the market right here? And that's what people did who bought property here in California in 2006. I had the honor of doing a radio broadcast with Bill Lusenheit, who's also a registered investment advisor. We did the radio show from 2003 to about 2007. From 2004, 2005, 2006, there wasn't a month that went by that we did not tell people to be very cautious on real estate, that this was a bubble in the making, and you need to be careful because you're going to get hurt if you're flipping houses. And man, when it busted hard. He said people were sleeping to get houses. People were getting out of jail and given loans so they could buy houses. People who had no business getting a loan were being given loans to buy houses. It was a bubble. Okay, learn the lesson, friends. When you see bubbles in markets, whether it's real estate, bonds, stocks, you need to be so careful. You need to be ready to get out or just simply get out because it's going to burst. And you don't know where you're going to be able to get out when it bursts, okay? So just know that, real estate, if you didn't get out, you got hurt. You had to wait it out. Now notice this, if you got in here, let's say you just held the stock. Well, the value's down, but at least I got the stock. I lost 90% of my value, but it'll come back. Yeah, it did. It took all the way to about 1955. So from 1929, if you had invested at the top of the market, you had to wait 26 years to get your money back to even. Now, there's something that you can do which is called dollar cost averaging. Let's just use this example since we've been on it. If you were able to buy into the market here and here and here and here and here as it dropped, you just kept buying in shares. Your average cost of shares is lower every time you buy on the way down. So that by the time you keep buying through, because you keep putting your investments in, as the market then goes up and it starts to come up back to where it was, the average price you paid, maybe it was somewhere in the 70s. So when it gets back to 400, you actually did make some money over that period of time. That's called dollar cost averaging. You just keep buying. And even when the market's down, you just keep buying. You're just buying at lower values. Now that's something that you need to know because it's, again, part of the principle of even if you're losing money in your investment, if you're contributing, you're offsetting that cost, okay? But notice here as well, 1966 to 1982, market was pretty flat. So when you look at these charts, yeah, it goes up. But if you happen to be starting your investments in 1966 and you were just buying into the Dow and holding it, it's going to be going up and down for the next 16 years, and you're basically getting back to square one. The value didn't really move a whole lot. So what do you do to deal with this? I want to talk about the importance of avoiding losses. If you lose 20% in the market, how much do you need to earn to get back to even? So you would want to say 20%, right? If you lose 20, you need to make 20. It doesn't work that way. 25. Scotty, 25%. Okay, what if you lose 25% in the market? How much do you need to get back to even? 33. Thank you, Scotty. If you lose 33% in the market, anybody but Scott? You lose 33% of your money in the market, how much do you need to get back to even? 50%. If you lose 50% in the market, now everybody should be able to get this one. This is simple math. You have $100 in the market. It goes down 50%, you have 50. What return do you need to make to get back to 100? 100%. Avoiding losses is so important. It's hard to get back when you lose 90% in the market, 1929 to 1932. When the market goes down 90%, how much return do you need to make if you go from 100 to 10? 10 times 1,000% to get back to square, okay? So you got to avoid the big losses. You can't be in the market when it's going down. Now, how many of you have heard of the term buy and hold? Buy and hold means you buy stocks, you hold it, you never sell it, you just write it out for your 40 years. That's one plan. But here's the thing. If you happen to be getting in 1966 and you're buying and holding the market, you might not have that much to show for it by the time it's done because every time you seem to make money, you lost it. It went back again. All right? All right, this is now not the Dow, this is the NASDAQ Composite going back from 1978 to current. So we're looking here at another 45-year period of time. Notice what happened. The NASDAQ Composite's looking good, big drop, right? So you went from 403 down to 327, starts riding up again. Notice the run here that took place in the late 90s, the tech bubble, there it is. If you have never seen it on a chart, there's your tech bubble, okay? I remember in December of 1999, right here, Scott Sharpen was at my house with Bill Lusenhide, and Bill said, this is a bubble, it's about to burst. It's gonna pop and people are gonna get hurt, and you better be ready to get out of the market. Sure enough, as soon as the new year started, it went up. It started going up like crazy. It got frantic. Do you know how when you blow a bubble, how it's pretty steady and stable? Bigger, 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 pop, right? That's what happened. The market shot up. At the beginning of 2000, the market just went crazy, hit, there's nobody left to buy at those prices. PEs, which is the price to earnings ratio, was over 400 for so many companies that were being listed. Now, what does that mean? It means that the earnings that the company was going to pay, the price was 400 times, which means, let's say a company makes $10,000 a year, right? You would have to make that 400 years to equal the price you paid for the stock. Why in the world would you ever do that? That's craziness. That's what people were doing. They're paying 400, 350, 300 times the PEs. There's no value in what you just bought. You way overpaid. That's what happened. So what happens when people finally figure that out? 5,000, 1,100. The NASDAQ Composite, the S&P 500, you ended up losing about 80% of the value if you would have bought and held through that time. These things happen because of manias, because of greed. Greed. People trying to make money on things that are not real. You know, when you sell a business today, PEs generally go for anywhere from about 3 times earnings to maybe 10 times earnings. You look at, on the stock market, you're talking 15 to 25. You're talking in the hundreds at this period of time. It was insanity. People kept buying till there's nobody left to buy. But everybody's like, you gotta get in, you gotta get in, you gotta get in. Friends, when everybody's telling you to get in, stay out, okay? It's too late. It was too late right here. They wrote it up to only write it back down. Now, the market starts to go up, another huge drop. Back in 2006, you have the drops here, or excuse me, 2009. So you had huge gaps and cavities. Notice here, we're at 5,000 at the top. Can you see that number right there? Not even back to 4,000 square yet. So even off its top, we're still down over 20% of that fall, okay? Which means that we still need another 25% increase just to get back to even where we were back in 1999. Who knows how long it'll take? We don't know. Maybe we're going to have another drop off this high point that we're at right now. The market's been running up pretty nicely. We might be ready for a little give back, right? PEs are getting out of line again. Things are getting a little more irrational. You got to be careful when things like this happen. So you look at the market and you say, how do you make money? How would you have done if you had invested through this period of time? It looks kind of rough. Now, what's amazing is there are ways to help protect yourself. I want you to look at this. This is using the NASDAQ. It goes back to 1963, and it shows you what the market did. If you had just invested in the NASDAQ and you bought and held it, so that's the numbers that are here on the left, the buy and hold. So you can see you had, like in 1973, you lost 31%. 1974, 35%. 1970, you had a 13% loss. 84 minus 11. 90 minus 17. 2008 minus 40. Here's your bubble, your tech bubble, right? You went up. Look at 22, 21, 39, 85, then a drop of 39, 21, and 31. 3 years in a row. You got reamed in the market. Reamed. Now, trend following. What is trend following? This is the application of a simple moving average. What is a moving average? A 100-day moving average is where you take the last 100 days of the market. You add up all the prices for the last 100 days, and it tells you what the average price has been over the last 100 days. Now, why is that important? Because you can look at whether the current stock price is above or below that 100-day moving average. So if the market is above your last 100-day average, it would tell you that the market is generally going up, right? But if the market is below the last 100-day average, which way is it going? Down. Now, you could do this with 50 days or 200 days. You could do this with any number of days you wanted. 100 is about a midterm range for looking at moving averages. But when you know where it is, you can determine, is my market going up or going down? And what that can do is provide for you an opportunity to tell you when you should buy or when you should sell. So, if you just apply this principle, I'm taking the last 100 days. If the market's up, I'm in it. If it's below that mark, I'm out of it. Look at what happened. Go back to 1973 with me, 31% loss. If you had just followed this simple moving average, you would have just held flat. You wouldn't have lost that 31%. Isn't that amazing? 74, the market was down 35. You actually would have made 6% in the market that year, even though the market itself was down 35%. Why? Because markets have a tendency to drop rapidly. They drop rapidly. Usually these bear markets that drop quickly happen very abruptly, very quickly, and they cause issues. Notice this. When you look at the market, look at how fast it dropped. I mean, it almost looks like the line is just drawn straight down. And then even when it shot back up, it just down, down, down. Brutal. Look at it's here, it's growing, 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 growing. A little drop, okay, but it's coming back, growing, 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 growing. Bam! Off a cliff. Why? Think about it like this. There's a fire in here. How fast is everybody getting out? Fast. But you guys all kind of stagger in kind of slowly when we arrive here. You ever notice that? People arrive more slowly, emergencies, you're out of here. People panic. Fear sends you running for the doors. And panic means sell-offs. And that's what happens in markets. Now, the question is, can you avoid some of these big losses? I'm telling you that for you to be successful, you can't be taking these 30% losses because you're going to take a 33% loss. It's going to take you 50 to get back to square. Okay? You can't suffer the big losses. You want to ride this on a buy and hold basis all the way down and lose 80%? Well, friend, if you want to go 80%, you got to make 400% to get back to even. You got to cut the losses short. So write this down. Let your profits run, cut your losses short. Let your profits run, cut your losses short. You want to try to avoid 80% of the big drops in the market. You can't ever avoid all of it because you don't know when it's dropping. You have to wait for some identification to say, we're below a moving average. We're below where we've been. This thing's selling off. We got to get out. We got to stop what we're doing, okay? Because you never know when the big drops are coming. But let me tell you this, if you look back and you can kind of see these dips. You see these big dips here? I mean, they look really pleasant on a chart. I'll tell you, when you go through them, it makes you sick. But these big drops happen, and what they are, they end up being about 25 to 30% drops. They happen once every 5 years. So what if you could take the 30% drops and minimize them to a 10% or 15% drop? The amount of return you need to get back to square is a lot less. All right? So there's the philosophy, and there's the rule on what's going on here. So when you look at these years, I want you to notice going back from 1963 to 2012, here's some negative years. You have the minus 31, minus 35, right? You have the minus 11, the minus 17. You got the minus 39, minus 21, minus 31, minus 40. I want you to look in the right column. There's some big losses, 11%. 9 and 7, 11, 2, right? There's some losses in there. Are there any big losses in there? The 30% losses, 20%, they don't exist because you were identifying a time to get out. That's where liquidity comes into play. If you're stuck and can't get out, you're just going to have to endure the loss. If you have liquidity, you jump out. And what that does is it allows you to save yourself on the losses and then ride the market up when it's going up. Okay? Let's look at it over the last 15 years. Here's back in 1998. What you're seeing here is the 100-day moving average. It's the blue line between these two red lines. The red lines are a filter. I use it in a filter of 2%. You could use any kind of filter you wanted, but basically it prevents multiple trading if you're right where your moving average is on the 100-day and you keep going like this. I don't want to get out in and out every time. I can make my trades less often if I put a little filter by that 100-day moving average. I use 2%. Some people will use 1, 1.5. You don't even need one. You don't have to have one, but I use one. So you see when the market goes up here at the end of 98, October of 98, we were not in the market here. When it pierced this top red line, you buy in. The market goes up. We got a sell signal right there. So we bought here, we sold here. Market goes back up. You buy here, stayed in. The filter protected us a little bit, went in, went all the way up to here. So we bought in here, sold out right there. We were out for all this noise, and had some false signals where I had to buy and sell right there. But then what happened is at the end of 2000, it really started to drop. And I sold out right there, and I was out the rest of all that drop. Okay? You don't have to maximize every little movement of the market. You're just going to spend a bunch of time chasing things. You have to minimize the big losses and cut them out. And then when the market's running up, you need to participate. So what I'm looking to do is participate in about 80% of the up runs, and I'm looking to stay out of about 80% of the down runs. And the difference is tremendous when it comes to your money, and you're multiplying according to the rule of 72. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here it is. You can't even see it on the chart because it was falling so dramatically. But here it is at the end of 2001. I got a signal to buy in here, and it was a false signal. I ended up having to get out. That happens when you have a timing signal. I didn't generate anything. That's okay. I don't mind that. I'm not going to get stressed about that. It's just when you get out, when you get in. But notice at that point, the market did another huge drop through 2002. Okay? So I sold back out, and then the market plops. I missed all that. The money wasn't invested at that time. That feels really good when the market's falling 30% and you're just sitting in cash and your money's just holding its value. That's all I'm doing. I'm just waiting for the day. I talked to you about catastrophe proofing. That's an important thing. Who remembers 9/11, right? We all do. 9/11, it really shocked the market, right? The market went down big time. We were already out. I didn't know when 9/11 was going to happen. I didn't know, it wasn't anything smart, but the market was moving down. When 9/11 happened, it was nice that we weren't in the market that day. It made me sleep better that night, knowing I wasn't invested in stocks because they had to close the stock market because there was a panic. And then when it opened, it plummeted. Scary times for us, right? We didn't know if this was the beginning of a lot of terrorist activities or things going on. But then when the market started to move back up, I bought in. I ended up having to get out here, bought back in, and then look what happens. 2003, you get this beautiful upward movement, participation. So the participation allowed me to make money. So I was able to hold my money pretty much out of the market when it was falling. And when it started running up, I was able to jump back in and ride the market up for a nice little return. Now realize, guys, this has been the worst time since the Great Depression that we've gone in since the year 2000. It has been the worst investment time for stocks since the year 2000, and real estate's been hammered as well. So when you look at these things, just realize the value of being able to stay out, and then when you have these little minuets, to come back in. Now, did this take us back up to the 5,000? Absolutely not. Now, we're close. But look, when you're able to buy in right here, at 1050, and you're able to ride it to where we sold back out at about 1,400, you're able to make a nice return, 40% on your money, and the powder was dry. You weren't losing all those big losses. So now the gains are much more meaningful because you made them after saving yourself the pain of loss. Okay? So you minimize those losses. Okay? And you can kind of see the way the chart goes. It doesn't always go as smoothly up or down. This was a very volatile period of time. In fact, very volatile period of time. Huge swings in the markets. It was a lot of noise for us, a lot of false signals. We weren't making much money in this period. It's okay, because we're not looking to make money in every trade in every moment. We're looking to protect ourselves when the market's going down. We're looking to get in when it's going up. Okay? So here we come now. We've been riding all this volatility, wondering which way the market's going to burst out, and it burst down. Bam. Smack down, another huge loss. You get out here, you get back in here. So again, when you're talking about that, you're talking about going from 1,900 all the way down to 1,200. It's a pretty huge loss. It's a pretty huge loss. Okay? How much money does it take you to get back? Well, you got to make another 50% just to get back to square. Or you buy in here and you ride the market back up. These all become positive to your retirement because you avoided this on the way down. There was a man who I worked with and was helping him with his money management. He was so upset by the volatility, he stopped working with me about right here. And he went with another advisor who had him basically in a buy and hold environment. He rode that puppy down with most of his money. He finally pulled the trigger about right here. And he said, I followed you and you were out through all that. I said, that's right. And that's why we do what we do. So he came back, and then we saved him this. And then he got back in and he rode that up. And he said, you know, if I had just stayed with the other guy, I would have ridden it all the way down. And I would have got all the up, but it would have meant nothing to me because he was already in his 60s. He didn't have, he was playing a dangerous game doing this. He was playing with his money. So then you have, again, the upturn. Okay, let's just finish out. You can see 2011, the way it works. The bands, you're in, you're out based on where it is. And then here's what we've seen here the last few months. Let me just show you. This has been this last year. 2013 was a very productive year. So when I talked about how the market's been going up, the market's been going up really nicely here the last year. But what's nice about this system is it can feel good to stay in. Oh, I'm just staying in. It feels so good. It feels so good. Here's my point in which I'm going to sell. I already know when I will sell. Now, every day the moving average is moving up. Why? Because I'm taking the last 100 days, I'm averaging it out, so it's following the market up. What I have is the ability to see this play. So see where you get some drops down in here? That's going to happen. You're going to have the drops. It comes back up. You're going to have drops. That's the way the markets run. By using the 100-day, I'm getting enough distance so that I don't have to jump in and out of the market every time, but I can also be in and participate knowing that at some point this is going to fall, this is going to rise, there's going to be an X point somewhere out here. I know I'm going to have to sell. You always want to have that identified before. Don't do this on emotion. Do you know that if you just invested in a buy and hold way in index funds and you invested over a 25-year period of time, you're going to earn about 10%. And that's a very nice rate of return invested over a long period of time. If you look back over the last 113 years, that's the average for investing in index funds. So I highly recommend that. It's well diversified. But if you were trying to stock pick, do you know what they found over the last 30 years? That people that try to figure out by their emotions or by their guessing or their own intellect when to get in and out or buying stock, they only make about 1.9% return compared to a 10% market. They're wasting their time. You would have been better just putting your money into money market funds because even though they haven't made anything for the last 10 years, before that you could make 4 to 6% money market funds. So people waste their time because they try to outsmart this. Don't try to outsmart it. Just be smart. Be smart about what you're doing. Okay? Don't think you can outsmart the markets. It's a fool's game. All right. Woman said she wouldn't have the money. I don't have the money to invest. Do you have the money to invest? When you look at your budgets, you need to think about God first, paying yourself first, and everything else later. But what's going to happen is if you've been living for a while, you're going to look at your budget and say, I can't do that. I was told this by a young woman. She said, I can't do it, David. I said, well, let's go through your budget. Let's look at where your money's going. Just show me the way you're spending. So she showed me, here's what I found. She was smoking. She was smoking and spending money. How much money were you spending on smoking? $60 per week for cigarettes. Burning her money away. Remember how I told you make your dollars servants? Those dollars were not serving her very well at all. They were ruining her health and they were ruining her future. What if she took the $60 and invested it $3,120 annually? How much money would she have over 40 years of following the plan? Yep. How much can she live on? About $80,000 a year after that. Okay? So a given time, given money, given dedication, you can do some pretty amazing things. So she would have been able to take about $82,000, and guess what? The principal would all still be there based on that distribution rate. There's a time for accumulation, and there's a time for distribution, and you know how to play it. So again, she would have been able to leave an inheritance of over $1.6 million to her heirs. So the biblical principles, we've seen all these, and then leave a financial legacy for your children. What's it say? Proverbs 13:22, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. So we end with this question, how are you managing your wealth? We've gone through principles today. We've talked about some specifics. I've given you a ton of information, probably information overload, but this will all be online if you want to watch it again. I'm going to end here thanking you for your patience and your time. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Please thank Miss Stephanie again for all the PowerPoint slides, because she did them. And just know that whatever I can do, whatever Scott can do, my wife is a wonderful budgeter, and she said if people would actually do what she would teach, she would be glad to have a class, because she's into helping people with budgets, and I can testify she's a good budgeter. So if you need any help in that regard, she is willing to do a little class on that, and God bless you. May God bless you in your finances.